French Gardens and Long Island Growing. This is the sixth year for this series, and your support for local food and the people who produce it is, as well as for Bridge Gardens and Peconic Land Trust, has made this a very successful series, and so I thank you for that. Let me begin by introducing today's panelists. We have Cori Kopke from Backyard Brine, and her husband Randy is part of the business, so he's here too. And Carolyn Iannone from Love Lane Kitchen, and Peter Haskell from Pascal Seafood. Thank you all for taking time out of your jobs and from your family to be here, and we really appreciate it, and also for all the wonderful food that you brought, which people can have afterwards. And of course, you all know Laura Donnelly, our loyal and very capable moderator. And as you remember, Laura is the food editor for the East Hampton Star, an accomplished pastry chef, and a contributor to the Barefoot Contessa program and cookbooks. And thank you for all you do, Laura.
Thank you, Rick.
And thanks to the Land Trust staff who organize and advertise the series, Kathy Kennedy, Pam Green, who's out there parking cars, Yvette DeBow, and also thanks to volunteers like Laura and the panelists today, really, as well as people like Carol Ehlers, who is a Peconic Land Trust board member, but who checked you in as a dedicated weeder. Jeffrey Wells, our stalwart videographer, and also Jack Van Alstyne, my friend who comes all the way from Hudson, New York, to help prepare the goodies that we enjoy at the end of these programs. So thanks to all those, and let's not forget to thank Peconic Land Trust too, for providing us with this venue where we can live up to our mission to be a community resource, for providing Bridge Gardens to the communities of the East End and of Long Island, really, every day and free admission, and for the important work it does to protect our farmlands, their quality of life, and the quality of our ground and surface waters too. And just want to acknowledge John Halsey, president of the Land Trust, right there. So.
Yeah, John.
Just a word or two about upcoming events. Paul Wagner will be here every Tuesday afternoon, starting on May 14th, to answer all your sustainable lawn and landscaping questions. And he's also having some workshops during the season on composting, edible landscaping, and lawn renovation toward the end of the season, when it's a good time to do that. So you may want to take note of that. And our music nights, we'll be having two of those. They'll be held on July 19th and August 23rd. And the popular tasting and a tour series will be on July 26th and August 30th. And then, because it was such a hit last year, the Birdhouse auction will be opening this year on June 28th, and that's the same day as our members only music night, which is reminds me to say that that's a great reason to become a member. And if you haven't, you should, or renew your membership. And if you are already a member, encourage a friend to become one too. Remember, all our education programs are free to members, and in fact, we have one coming up on April 13th, which is starting your vegetable garden. And that's the same day that our community gardens open, and we have an orientation for the gardeners who are part of that. Let's see, I think that might be it. Remember to check your Connections newsletter for all the dates and times for not only those programs, but all the programs that the Land Trust offers. So thank you all for coming and for being here today. I'll see you all next Sunday, April 7th, for another Long Island Grown. And with that, I'll turn it over to Laura and the panelists.
Thank you, Rich. Excellent. Thank you all for coming this far. Thank you all for coming. I say it every time. I'll stop saying it eventually, but there are so many familiar faces at this point. After doing this for 6 years, I'm like, oh, hey Pat, hey Carol, hey everybody, hey John, always hey John. So thank you for supporting this. So before I start asking you guys questions, I just want you guys to introduce yourselves briefly and just say how you came about starting this business that you're running, or taking over a restaurant, or someone who got their first commercial fishing license at the age of 14, right? Right?
That's right.
So do you go by Cori or Corianne?
Cori.
Cori, okay, that's it, scratch out
I
the
mean,
end.
either work, but
So Cori and her husband Randy are at Backyard Brine. Probably everybody in this room. Who's had Backyard Brine pickles? At the farmers markets and other places. Okay, so tell us your background and how you two came about, met, and started this business together.
yeah. So Randy and I are a husband and wife team. We're company is about 5 years old now, and about 6 years ago, my younger brother got married in Montauk, and we offered to make the favors for his wedding. So we made about 150 jars of pickles for his wedding, and we called them Dildectuous part. We go together like bread and butter, and relish the moment. And people just love them. And we didn't have enough cucumbers in the backyard garden to make the order, so I went to the local IGA by us. We were living back in East Northport at the time. And the produce manager was like, what are you doing with all of these cucumbers? And I said, oh, I'm making pickles for my brother's wedding. And he was like, oh, you make pickles? That's fantastic. I would love to sell them here. So I said, okay, after my brother's wedding, I'm going to figure out how to do that. So we naively, thankfully, started the path of getting into the food industry after that. And now 5 years later, we're in about 15 states. We have distribution throughout the Northeast. We're on the shelves in IGA, Whole Foods, King Cullen, and our favorite is like all the local farm stores and farmers markets, where our roots are and where we originally started.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Carolyn from Loveland Kitchen. I managed Loveland Kitchen before I bought it from the previous owner in 2012 for about 4 years. And always loved food, always loved the world of wine. I worked at Palm Rock Vineyards for some time in their tasting room and really just fell in love with the North Fork and doing business with all of these passionate people. And I was a student, I was an English journalism and film student. I want to do what you do, actually. I thought I would I love to eat and drink and write and travel, and I thought when I got the opportunity to work at Loveland Kitchen that would be a sort of interesting new perspective of that food and wine world that I had never experienced before. I always waited tables and bussed and was working 14 years old cleaning bathrooms too, like the kids do at Loveland now. And I thought that would be an interesting opportunity, and I just loved it. I loved leading a team of people, and I loved being involved in that community aspect with all of our regulars, and seeing just that sort of synergy of service and hospitality, and doing that kind of work just became so great. So when the opportunity came up to buy it from the previous owner, naively and also just kind of like, I'm probably still the most surprised person in the room. Jumped on that opportunity, and it's just been kind of a fun little roller coaster ride since then. So going on 7 years.
That's it.
Yeah.
2012, right?
2012, yeah. So it'll be 7 years in August.
Who's been to Love Lane Kitchen in Mattatuck? All right, we have more hands than Pickles.
We have your pickles.
Okay, Peter.
Yes. As you'd said, Laura, at a young age, I grew up in a household where my father was a biology teacher, my mother was an English teacher, and in the summers, my father would clam to make extra income. So at a very young age, I was exposed to our estuaries, had some education tied along with the art of fishing. And by 14, I got my first commercial clamming license, because really it was this burst of entrepreneurial opportunity in my mind. Like, hold on, if I maintain this boat and I can get out onto the water, At that time in history, duck farms were buying clams. They were clam dealers, and Moriches Bay, where I grew up, was there was many of them around. So I could effectively ride my bike to where I kept the boat, where I mowed the lawn for the person that allowed me to keep the boat. I could get on the boat and clam, get to the duck farms to sell the clams, get back to my boat, to the bike, to the house, and I made a day's pay. So that started early, and it was really, it was a moment of not only inspiration, but independence. And I think that's what drew me to the commercial fisheries, which today is at Haskell Seafood.
Do you still ride your bikes for me?
No.
You still have a bait and tackle shop too?
Yeah, I didn't want to draw out my story, but along the path, in 2007, as a fisherman, I was looking to reach the retail audience directly, to engage about our local environment, access to the bay that I had had the experience to have when I was younger. I started to realize that not everybody got this experience, especially with a lot of tourism in our area. So at that time in history, the fisheries was really changing, and I had a business plan for a fish market and one for a tackle shop. And I leaned towards the tackle shop because I felt like it was a safer place to be, honestly, with the way regulations were headed locally. And yeah, so reaching the public, I continued to commercially fish all this time too. So I'm providing my stores with the bait fish that we sell, and I'm also selling my fish to restaurants that are food fish. And I believe it was really timing where Haskell Seafood, I felt that the community was ready to embrace local seafood and commit to it. And that's the commitment that we've made through a brand called Haskell Seafood, is that we only work with that Long Island product. And at this point in time, 90% of the seafood consumed in the US is actually imported from overseas. It's a startling number if you haven't heard. I say that a lot, so I hope I'm not rehearsing myself with people that might have heard that before, but that's a true number. It's actually over 90%. And a lot of that,
You told me that yesterday.
Yeah.
it is shocking, and the amount of hands that actually have to touch that fish to get it here, the average is 15. So when you think about food safety, when you think about our local fishermen that are up against these numbers, not to go too far into this, but just to give you an idea, is that other countries that don't have the same regulations we do here in the US, they can produce a cheaper product because they can catch as much as they'd like, or possibly more than us. So it hits our marketplace, and consumers are very attracted to the price point for starters. Again, this is where Haskell Seafood steps in to promote what's local. It has a small carbon footprint. Because we're highly regulated, we are a sustainable country as well as a state. New York State only gets 7% of the fishing quota on the East Coast. So not to bore you with numbers, but these are all the motivations to really get behind local product and promote it and give it that personality it deserves, which is sustainable, quite often underutilized, and the food safety is paramount.
And complicated.
And complicated,
Yeah,
that's
I
where I
have
step
more
in.
questions for you about it, and it's still like so hard to understand. So less traumatic to talk about than the freshness of fish and farmed and imported. How do you guys come up with the names for your pickles? They have the best names. There's like pumpernickel rye rise, dill death do us part, that was sweet heat, rowdy pepper belly, holiday time spelled like the herb time. So who's the funny, the punny one?
She comes up on them like that.
But they're inspirations from our friends, family, life. Pumpernickel Rai, Randy's cousin Ryan, that's his nickname, Rai. And we just name them after. Rowdy Pepperbelly is like a nickname someone gave Randy.
And
All the time ago.
my favorite was named after
It can get a
your
little
dog.
fiery.
Our dogs.
And then our two
Yeah,
beloved
barbecue
dogs.
Betty too,
Yeah.
right?
Betty and Sienna. Betty was our black lab and Sienna was our chocolate lab. So we made a barbecue line in memory of them. We have barbecue Betty and smoky Sienna.
And then how do you come up with flavors? I understand you like more like bread and butter sweet pickles. You're kind of like, you have smoked pickles?
Yeah.
Yeah, we hand smoke everything on a pit smoker over cherry and hickory wood. Same way you smoke like a brisket, or we do a lot of southern barbecue. And then when we first started the company, one of our friends was over, was having a couple of beers, and I'm smoking a pulled pork or something. He's like, "Why do you make smoked pickles?" I was like, "Let's do it." And we did it, and that was our recipe from that night. You cannot
Wow.
like just the way it tasted today. So we do a smoked sweet pickle with Vermont maple syrup, brown sugar, apple cider vinegar.
So it's already pickled and then it goes in the smoker?
No, the raw ingredients, some of the raw ingredients are
Ah.
smoked, and then we incorporate it into our brine.
Ah,
And you get that
Yeah.
southern barbecue flavor.
that's amazing. And you like the sweet?
Yeah, so I'm in charge usually of the sweet pickles, and Randy's in charge of like the salty, spicy
Mhm.
ones. And then I think because both of our palates are kind of on different spectrums, we have come out with something for everybody. Kind of, things I like and things you like are totally different.
Yeah.
So with both of us coming in with the recipes, we have like a well-rounded, I think, portfolio, except that we come
How,
up with.
how many pickles in the line do you have right now? And I know you have some seasonal as well.
Yeah, we have 10 available for stores,
Mhm.
with 2 of them being the holiday ones. We
Mhm.
do a holiday time, which is like a garlic and herb. It's great on like holiday charcuterie platters. And then, but at the farmers markets and stuff, we still do, and for a lot of our local places like that request them, we deal with the local farms and whatever they have extra of, like when cauliflower's in season, we do a cauliracha, which is like with a sriracha brine. And we also make a sriracha slaw on when the cabbage is available. And we just came out with a Bloody Mary mix that we've been kind of dabbling with and testing the market with.
That would be good if you can get your pickles on our Bloody
Yeah,
Mary.
we gotta drop that off.
Yeah.
I like this when we have a little networking. They're also looking for pickles. We'll have a community public service announcement, more Kirby pickles, cucumbers,
Yeah,
excuse me.
more local farmers for Kirby's.
North Fork, South Fork, in your own backyard, in your garden plot here, pickles please, cucumbers please, I keep saying that. So Carolyn, I have a little quote from you which to me sounds so much like a dedicated restaurateur. At the end of the day, I became owner of Love Lane Kitchen for the love of the food, wine, and most of all, people. And you also talk about hospitality and freshness being the most important thing. Now, since I do restaurant reviews and I've also worked as a chef in a lot of restaurants, I agree with all of that, but the hospitality aspect is the thing that is completely free. All it has to be is taught to employees or for the owner to have it themselves. Tell us your philosophy
That's
on
a great
the
question.
hospitality aspect.
That's a great question. Actually, I spend a lot of time talking about this because I think it really is the most integral part of what we don't even sell. And I think it's probably the most common ground in any business. We just happen to be, feeding you omelets, but really at the end of the day, it's just about that connection. And, so Mom's here right now, which is a great, it's so much to do with, Mom was a Mary Kay consultant when I was so young, and we were taught, that kind of philosophy of like, everyone has a sign, of an invisible sign on them that says, I'm important, or, and Mom had always taught me and my siblings that you just love one another and you treat people the way you want to be treated. And when that is your basis for how you treat your staff and how you treat people around you, I think that becomes this really kind of powerful, like, silent partner of yours that can, exactly what you're saying, is free, but is that kind of resonating sort of like fifth element that you can't really put your finger on when you walk into a place. It's the culture, and it kind of becomes what you're known for. So, of course, I think you can maybe have a successful restaurant for a little while that has really good food but like terrible service. But the food has to be like unbelievably delicious for you to, really. And I don't think it's sustainable, And I think probably everyone probably has that story that they're like, I know, but the soup is so good. Let's just like go, like, it's terrible. And you suck it up, but then really, like, you probably stop going. Or vice versa. Like sometimes maybe you go to a place that doesn't really necessarily test out everything, but you just love how it feels. So I like to think that we really kind of have the best of both worlds because you start with that love and you start with that passion of that quality because you want to offer those things to your friends and your family. Like our chef, I joke around and say that I swear we're like cousins or like fifth cousins or something because we had such a similar upbringing, Our moms both made like the same exact Italian everything. It's so funny. And you know, Cori is his name, and he does things with such love too, so that when the staff sees you making those choices and making those decisions, you know, sometimes, you know, you're teaching all these young kids, like what you said, the hospitality, which is very challenging. We are, like, average age of our staff is like 20. And, you know, they might be like cutting corners or rushing or doing something, and Cori will stop them, or I'll stop them and say, like, if your mom was here, like, would you serve that to your mom? Like, no, like, the toast is burnt, like, you gotta start over. And just those little things really add up, I think, to just make that message that you do things with love and excellence, which is something my mom always taught me as well. And I think at the end of that day, when you really just are doing things because you care about your staff and you care about their relationship to their customer, it really has this very cyclical, powerful sort of synergy that you're taking care of your staff and you're taking care of customers, but your staff's also taking care of your customers as well. And it's really a powerful thing. And it is all about that hospitality. You know, you really need to love what you do, and you have to be sincere about it, because people will know. You know, you can't fake that. And that doesn't mean that you're, you know, like, love every minute of every day. It doesn't mean that you're like skipping through the dining room when it's 90 degrees and you're, you know, like, you're just totally, like, you know, getting it to the face. Like, it doesn't mean that you're like, every minute is going to be easy, or every minute's going to be this joyous, like, celebration, but you have to believe in what it is that you do. And when I teach that to the staff, or when we train that to the staff, you can take those punches a little bit easier, because you know, in the grand scheme, you are working towards something that's important, and you are a part of a community, and you are part of a team. And so it makes those challenging days, you know, a little bit more, you know, you can roll with it a little bit easier.
And you are open 7 days a week, right?
7 days a week, year round.
That's
Yes.
a lot.
We close
That
Christmas
is a
Day.
lot.
Yeah, we close Christmas Day, and we close, you know, holidays and stuff, because you know, like I said, I don't want to be there on Christmas, so I'm not gonna expect my staff to be.
Yeah.
And, like, you know, apocalyptic snowstorms. But other than that, we're there, you know, like, come hell or high water, so
And
people
it's
need their coffee.
It's a very, very good restaurant too.
Thank you.
I like it very much.
Thank you.
I wish we had something like, well, we kind of have a few things
Yeah.
kind of like that, but not exactly like that on the East End. So Peter, I think you beat me to one of the alarming statistics, that 90% of seafood sold in the United States is imported,
Yep.
which is, you know, unbelievable. And I'm hoping that these are correct as well, that of the farm-raised and imported fish, only 2% is inspected by FDA,
I believe that there's,
and 60% of that is rejected.
there's a process that isn't necessarily, it's somewhat broken in how imports do come to our country. And there's a point where there's no transparency. And that's really what we get on board with local seafood that's regulated, is that there's a set of transparency to where you can, if you really wanted to, trace your seafood back to the person that caught it on a local level. That's the kind of conduit Pascal Seafood wants to provide. You lose transparency when you start to cross borders, when you get into other countries, and you just don't know what's happening, to the point where, you know, it can be alarming if it starts to become so influential.
Right. So you may have even worked with them. Were you with Sean Barrett, Dock to Dish?
Sean and I are friendly with each other. We communicate quite often, and we have very similar missions. I think one of the differences is that Sean is working in communities really around the world at this
Nicaragua
point, doing incredible work, promoting the idea that there is this radius around where you're coming from, where your fish is coming from, that enhances that transparency. What we're doing is a commitment to Long Island. As a Long Islander myself, we are really rooted to become that hub of transparency, and as well to prepare seafoods. So we're not just talking about raw fish now. We hit many levels of distribution where we can have a raw product that is just handed off to somebody that's going to work with it. We can fillet or open shellfish to service a restaurant. But we're also cooking with these seafoods, and we're taking recipes that were traditional on Long Island and kind of carrying that heritage into the future. with the products, and we're trying to make them as easy to prepare at home as we can. So a lot of our foods are ready to eat in the sense that we have a chowder that's frozen in a boil in a bag. So all you have to do is get home and drop it in boiling water for 10 minutes and it's ready to go. Why are we taking it that far? Because I believe we need that type of marketing and we need that type of convenience to break down this wall that's allowing, you know, this cost-effective seafood into our world to such an extremity. I'll stop there.
Do you sell your, when I read about them, I was like, I want to try those because I love porgy, the porgy
Yeah.
and potato fish sticks.
Yeah, that was a fun project that came, sometimes like an architect, form follows function, I guess, but this is how this went, is that porgy is a very underutilized seafood, okay? So it's very abundant, the stock is massive. So when you're seeing, let's say it's an imported seafood on a menu, like a fish and chips, let's say, it could be a lot of different things. When you see a fish stick, it could be a lot of different things. My hope is, why not take this underutilized seafood that's totally abundant and start placing it, getting it into those seats. So we worked with Amagansett Food Institute in reaching the local schools, because I think there's education in this subject matter too that young people should be aware of, because these young people can go catch a porgy too. They're in our backyard, they're easy to attain because they're abundant. So we designed a school lunch program, a sustainable seafood lunch program. We approached Southampton schools, Bridgehampton. Bridgehampton wound up being able to take on this lunch program because they had a grant that was local to bring in local vegetable. Problem was, they didn't write seafood into the grant. So we're sitting around, I'm thinking, well, you know something? If we made a fish stick, we need a binder to hold that thing together, right? So what if we took local potato, which is, you know, I mean, what's more historical than a local potato, and blend it into the fish stick, so we'll have a porgy and potato fish stick that would meet the grant. Now, why am I talking about a grant? Because the school lunch budget for children to eat is some staggering small number. Like, you know, it's like, it went up 15 cents this year to maybe it's a 30-cent budget for a school lunch for a child. And people are celebrating it went up, you know, for the first time in 20 years. So here we are trying to break down that wall now, is that, you know, what are we feeding them with 30 cents a day? So this grant opened the door to where we could bring our price down as far as we could just to get the product in the door. And we created this exciting program that hence was the porgy and potato fish stick. And we put them then into our website and menu as well because they love them. This is the beautiful thing, is that we did these trial tastings and they loved it. Like beyond loved it. And we were almost, AFI, myself, and even the school lunch coordinators were almost shocked that, you know, for many of them, it was the first time they were trying fish and things. So it was a success.
I've tried the fish burger that was started with some local chefs out here.
Yeah, Sean Barrett was responsible for the fish burger.
And Jason Weena and Eric Repair, the
That's right.
famous chef of La Bernardin, apparently had a part. When I saw the shallots and the recipe, I was like, oh, that's Eric Repair's part.
Yeah.
He's got the fancy allium in there.
Right.
But yeah, so I do want to try those porgy. And how many people out here know that they have had porgy?
That sounds good.
Porgy's
When I was a kid. Porgy's awesome. It's full of bones, but it's delicious, right? Nice white fish.
It's a wonderful fish. In fact, tilapia that is really heavy in our marketplace, right? Tilapia, everybody's buying it, using it in the, you know, in the middle of the country as well. This fish resembles tilapia in size. I believe the flavor is much, much better, and you're getting minerals such as selenium, magnesium from our saltwater environments in a wild-caught seafood that's very good for us. So it's almost like you talk about fast food and slow food. The porgy is very valuable that way.
I love them. So Cori and Randy, you both were doing completely different things when you decided to start this business after the success of the wedding pickles. How do you go about just, and it hasn't been that many years, going to the business incubator at Stony Brook, starting a business, and then, there must be thousands of businesses that never end up in a Whole Foods or, you know, every IGA out here, you know, and yeah, maybe the farmers markets, but if it's good. But so what advice would you give to some of these youngsters who are like, hey, I'd like to start a business too?
Yeah.
I think you almost have to not know what you're getting into. I think so. Like we literally, you know, I still actually, my background is I was actually a dance teacher and accounting. I still do have a day job, and Randy also still works too. And we've just, you know, been growing these things, and I think what helps us is like the small goals. Like, you know, we would just set our eyes on like one, like first it was like, okay, let's figure out how to get into IGA. So we took out books and we just literally went like page by page, like this is how you deal with nutritional panels. This is how you know, you have to call New York State Ags and Markets and get what's called a 20C license. And Randy went to Rutgers University to a better process control school. Because if you're going to do acidified canning, you have to actually be certified in all of that. So we kind of divided and conquered. Randy would handle some of the things. I would deal with nutritional panels. And before we knew it, we had, you know, then we stumbled upon the incubator kitchen to actually produce the products. But it came back to like our love of gardening and cooking, which is what started it, which was just a hobby. But I think if we didn't love doing both of those things and together doing those things, that's I think what just always keeps us going. You know, so when we get caught up in like the day-to-day of, you know, distributors and, you know, things going wrong and stuff like that, I think when we go back to like where we started and why we started and, you know, things like that, that's what always draws us back to, you know, okay, this is what we're doing now. you know?
You still have time for the backyard gardening and cooking?
So that's what's so funny. For the last couple of years, we actually hadn't. Last year, we brought it back again because we were so busy in the summers running to farmers markets and things like that we actually didn't have time for our backyard garden, which was a little depressing for us. Like we were like we both grew up in families, so we were so fortunate that we had backyard gardens every year. And so for a couple of years there, we were like, who are we? What's going on? Like, we don't cook anymore, we don't garden anymore, we're just like running around.
You turned into business moguls?
Yeah, so last year we've slowly been like making sure we incorporate that back in. And we actually last Sunday was like the first nice day. We were out in the yard all day. We ripped apart the old garden, and you know, we'll start our seed soon. And it's something we really try to maintain now, not lose.
Cornichon.
Yes, cornichon.
Cornichon. I'll come over and pick them for you.
Okay, good.
We were talking about that the other day. So Carolyn, on top of everything else you do, we should take a trip, or you should come with me to do a restaurant
Yes,
review.
I
So
would love
we
to.
can put you to work on
Yeah.
that. But you're also a sommelier,
Yes.
and you worked at Jedediah Hawkins
did.
restaurant.
Yep.
And so how does also being a sommelier, there's plenty of people who own restaurants
Yeah.
and like don't know anything, and then they hire the sommelier.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other area of complicated knowledge. How does that help you? And you obviously pick all the wines for the restaurant. Do you have your own label or anything like that?
Yeah, we did do our own label. So I was working at Pomanock and really got very knowledgeable with the world of wine, the North Fork, which was so interesting to learn all about. But you know, the world of wine obviously is a very, very big place. So I dragged myself into the city once a week. I was also working 3 jobs and writing for a couple of different publications. Actually, I was freelancing for Edible East End and Dance Papers and the Wine Press, actually. Yeah, I wrote a tutorial on how to behave in a tasting room. Yeah, actually, the Times quoted it. The New York Times quoted it, not my name, but I was like really excited to be in the New York Times, like inadvertently. Actually, a friend of mine framed that article for me and was like, look, you made it to the Times. I was like, my name's not even in it. But that was still really cool. And so I got certified. I did a couple of different levels of the wine trust, the Spirit and Education Trust program. And then just really loved it. And that was what brought me, my boyfriend at the time was living in California. We were doing long distance for a little while, so it was also traveling to LA. That was fun. And I ended up moving over there because I thought I was going to be working in a tasting room over there, which actually ended up flying through. Not that it matters. But when I was working at Jedediah's, Tom Chaudel and Adam Levitt over there were just incredible people to work for. Tom Chaudel's, you guys know who Tom Chaudel is.
Yeah.
I was a kid bussing tables and doing those things, and the environment in restaurants were, they were crappy. It was like so acceptable because that's always like how it was. It was just known for that. And really, it was when I worked for Tom that I realized, and this has been really influential as being a woman in the business that has stayed with me, was that there's absolutely no reason to be anything but 100% professional in a kitchen. And Tom was just such a pleasure to work with because he was so talented and so passionate. But his kitchens are totally zen. They're quiet, they're calm, they're professional, they're clean, and they're efficient. And he was very caring. And I mean, you definitely were like, it wasn't like relaxed. It wasn't like easy, but it was just so professional. And so, and Adam Lovett, who is Iannone and Allure, was the front of the house manager, and he was exactly the same way, just a complete professional and so passionate about what he did. So I learned a lot from them in that retrospective thing. So when I was traveling around and working in different restaurants and then working at Lovely Kitchen, that really like translated over, because when you're hiring people and you're kind of creating that culture, you just like have things that are either acceptable or not acceptable. So you kind of create this other culture. And getting back to the wine, which was your question, Tom Saudel's wine lists were always so awesome. And so when I got asked to work at Lovely Kitchen originally, I moved back from California to do their wine list. So I got like, it was so funny, like hired to be their sommelier at this like breakfast lunch restaurant, like so funny, like it was like such overkill, but I was so excited about it. And when I took over, I changed the wine list to 100% local wine. So it's just North Fork wines. We do everything by the glass, and I keep it really small, and I just rotate it really often. So it's just like so fun. Like when I'm supposed to be like filing and doing paperwork, I'm like, I'm gonna go do the wine list. That's like the fun thing. And it's just it's so amazing to showcase the different. I mean, there's just such incredible wines out here, and it's so nice to I don't want to say like force people to order local wine, because we're still in the hospitality industry, but if you had anything else on the wine and someone was slightly closed-minded about the North Fork or South Fork, East End wines, they were going to order the like Italian Pinot Grigio. They weren't even going to try anything else. And so by making it that way, like maybe if someone really was so closed-minded, they would get like a cocktail instead. But for the most part, they would try then something. And we do everything by the glass, so we offer tastes. And we really were able to showcase like some really incredible wines, and I think sort of change people's minds on the wines, because they were kind of like forced to try it. So that's all we had. And that was a really positive thing. It was great. And then Allie Shaper of Allie Shaper Fine Wines and Brooklyn Enology and Haywater Cove. She has a couple of really amazing wines. And Robin Epperson, both now, you can get their wines at Peconic Cellar Door on Peconic Lane. She and I were chatting one day, and I was looking for like a really specific rosé. And we decided that, and a white wine. And I wasn't really finding what I wanted. And then she was like, I was like, can I make my own? She was like, yes, we should do that. So she made the wine and brought me all the samples, and we played around with the blends. And I had did a white label, which was a Gewürztraminer Chardonnay and Pinot Blanc blend. That was amazing. And then we're on our second vintage of rosé right now, all under like the Share the Love, we called it, as Lovely Kitchens. So it's fun. Like I came home from work the day, and my husband asked me how work was, and I was like, good, I bought a pallet of wine. So he's like, how many cases is that? I'm like, 65. He's like, is that going to be here, like in the garage? I'm like, no, I'll figure it out. But, so that was really fun, because you have to get minimums to do your own label. But it's been so widely like just great. The reception of it has been awesome. So we've loved that, and it was specific to our food.
You've probably seen changes in people's attitude towards North Fork wines or
Yeah.
Long Island wines.
Oh yeah,
More
I mean,
receptive
oh
now.
my gosh, now compared to when I first started working at Pomanock, which was in 2005, and even then it had been maybe really already like a decade in the making of like better perceptions, and thanks to Pomanock and people like making great wines. So it was great. And you know, I do actually have kind of a funny story. I had Anthony Nappa's wines on the list, and like I swear, I wasn't trying to trick people. They just did this themselves. And they would order the Anthony Nappa wine because they weren't reading it, and they just saw Napa. It's spelled with 2 P's, and that's what they would order because they were like, oh, and you'd hear them like, oh, I don't really like Long Island wines. I'll just get the, you know, I'll just get this Cabernet from Napa, and no one would say anything. So we just wouldn't correct them.
Wait
you know?
until they compliment the wine.
Yeah, and then
tell them.
we'd ask them, you know, like we'd be like, oh, okay, and then we'd come over and be like, oh, how's the wine? And they're like, oh, it's great, I love it, it's so good. We're like, yeah, it's right down the road, you know, it's that iconic lane. And they're like, oh no, I got the one from Napa. And I'm like, no. The winemaker is Anthony Napa. And they're like, this is Long Island wine. They're like, fall off their chairs. And it's like, just a fun little highlight.
Yeah, that's good, that's good.
Yeah.
So Peter, let's do some Debbie Downer type stuff. No, not really, but serious things. I'm always like, yeah, how do you come up with pickle names? So climate change, the rising ocean temperature, in your lifetime, even though you're still a young man, have you seen any change in fish availability related to climate change, and what do you foresee for the future?
I think it's an interesting topic that obviously I could not claim to be an expert on, but I can talk about my observations. And I've had some good conversations recently with my friend Sean, the Conic Baykeeper, regarding topics like this. We engage a lot and just chat that has to do with some of these more serious, heavier topics. And I think that we've seen shifting in the types of fish that we see seasonally showing up. Okay, so it's a really simple observation that let's say in the last 10 years, there's some fish that you saw once in a while, but now there's more of them. There's some fish you might not see as much of, but they're still around. And you start to think about where they come from. Is there a shift? Like, cyclically things change, and there's an organic change that happens. Like blowfish, for instance, we might have grown up eating blowfish on Long Island. My family did, and puffers, they disappeared to some degree, and that had a lot to do with the eelgrass beds dying off from nitrogen in our water. So the puffers have returned, and we're getting this huge spring run, and we don't necessarily have this robust eelgrass bed that we had in the 70s, 80s, but they're here again. So you can't really. Maybe. I believe that there's a cyclic behavior. There's a book that was written about in 1920 to 1930. Long Island didn't see any bluefish, right? So that's kind of before big major change occurred on the island with housing or industry. But it's a real documentation that the bluefish, which is very common, just didn't show up for 10 years. So when you start looking at it that way, like, well, why was that? There's no good reason that we could formulate in today's world to talk. It really just lends to me that we have to let nature do its thing. The oceans are vast, and we only know so much about it. We don't know everything about the ocean. I think they say 10%'s explored. So, it's a good debate. I'm not going to stand up and say that, oh yeah, global warming is shifting everything around, but I think that you can see cold water fish residing a little north at times that I didn't see 10 years ago. You do see fish that might reside in the Chesapeake Bay showing up a little more frequently or for longer durations of time. So I'm an observer. I'm not an expert, but I watch those things, and I think that there's always a combination of reasons that things happen. It's never just one thing.
Yeah. So Peter also teaches cooking and likes to cook. Can you give us some examples of very specifically locally sourced seafood that people can buy or get in restaurants? I mean,
Sure.
Probably a lot of people here know, but like I'd never tried golden tile fish until a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So what are some examples of, what you catch specifically or dive for or whatever that are local?
I think the first step in finding local is to ask for it. And, whether it's a restaurant, a fish market, like we talked about all this other imported fish that's in our circuit, most people would walk into a situation and not really think about that because they might not know. They might look at a fish case and think, well, I'm in Montauk, this must be from Montauk, and I don't blame them for thinking that. But we are at a point in time where it's good to say, so I see your selection, I see you've got swordfish, is that local swordfish? And you know, you really want to kind of, to some degree, demand an answer to that if you're passionate about it. And what this is a call to action for all of us. I quite often say that, you know, I might sit here talking about the fisheries with my experience, but there's something that everybody can do. And that would be to simply just ask your waiter, is it local? Sometimes restaurant business is difficult, and there's not always that pre-staff meeting to discuss where a fish is from. But if that individual comes back to the owner a few times and said, hey, you know, everybody's asking me if this is local, that's how change happens. Because now the owner's like, hey, there's something to this. People keep asking the same question, we need to address it. So getting back to your question, first thing is to identify local. Fish that I harvest personally was the question, I guess.
Yeah.
I do free dive for bay scallops throughout the season.
Oh, cool.
I think that there's a lot of similarities in farming and fishing because it's seasonal, right? So come November, I'm all about bay scallops. That's what I'm doing. And I can be in the water until January with a 7mm suit that I wear. I've also used dredges for them in the past. These days I enjoy and prefer the free diving as long as the seals haven't come in yet. Got a funny story about that. And then in the spring, finfish really kick in. So, you know, in my business, okay, we buy from other local fishermen as well. I find that I'm pushed more and more to harvest the unusual fish, the underutilized fish, because they don't have much value. So I can't rely on other fishermen to go target a fish that might be worth 25 cents a pound because they won't make a day's pay. So as my business evolves, I'm left with the responsibility of, okay, if we need smooth dogfish shark, which you might not have ever heard about before, I'll have to go get it myself. So finfish season, I'm usually filling in the gaps. What we don't see in the standard marketplace, we're trying to make that marketplace more robust, more interesting, with more discovery. So it's a seasonal approach. You'll see different types of fish come throughout the year. There's really never a month where there's nothing to catch. So fortunately, we can be 100% committed to local seafood and never have that day come where, oh, we don't have any product to sell. There's always something happening.
Good.
Yeah.
That's good to know. I'm going to open it up for audience questions for our panelists. If anybody wants to know about chocolate-covered pickles, these are the people to ask.
We did it.
Yes, striped shirt, Sue.
Peter,
Yes.
question, lionfish, talk to me about
Mm.
that. Because
Okay.
that seems to be the ongoing thing, even though it's dangerous, it's like the wonderful new fish. So talk to me.
Yeah, fortunately, I have spent winters in Florida in the past commercially fishing, and I feel like I can answer that question because of that experience. So the lionfish is kind of a fish tank fish
Yeah.
that escaped into the wild, and they have no natural predator, and they're voracious. So the reefs down in Florida are, pardon?
Decimated.
Yeah, they're decimated because you've got these fish that are just eating all the food source for other fish and nothing can consume it. So there's programs in Florida where they're having these spearfishing tournaments to really kind of try and rid the reef of these invaders. They are extremely poisonous. I did get stuck by one once and it wasn't fun. For 45 minutes I had numbness in my arm and I felt my heart acting a little differently, which was frightening, but the effect of them to any animal could be deadly. So anyway, it is a delicious fish. You know, any fish, if it's handled properly and if the chef knows what to do with that fish per its description, I can't say I come across bad fish, right? So I mean, the lionfish does have a delicacy to it. The yield's a little low, but I think the idea is that if we can get people interested in eating lionfish, great solution to start getting them out of the circulation, right? So that's my experience.
Yes.
Peter, you said that 90% of the fish we consume is imported.
Yeah.
And what is that, like mostly tilapia and catfish and shrimp, I suppose? What's coming in?
It's really a lot of many different sectors in our industry, whether it's wild caught fish, farm raised. Here's something unfortunate, is that because of the way things are set up globally, we have local harvests that sometimes get sent to China to be processed, and then they send them back. So that's part of that 90% too, and that's on us, you know. So again, to take on responsibility as a seafood processor, we're saying that we're keeping all of that local. And really, you know, back in the day, there were seafood processors on Long Island that were abundant. There's a lack of them now. And I think we might be the only one right now doing, well, I know we are, that we're 100% committed to local seafood. And then try and find a seafood processor, hard to come by. You know, there might be variations of like a retail store cutting some fish, and you could call that processing. But there's a lack of distribution. So that 90% is an accumulation of a lot of different types or components of the industry. But it's a staggering number that really comes down again to price point. I don't know if I'm repeating myself, forgive me. But because we're managed, we can only take so much fish locally, and it drives the price higher because it's more desirable. When you've got a country that's unregulated and anything goes, they can send in a huge amount of fish into our market with a low price point. So I really believe that through marketing, promotion, pointing out the value that's in local seafood, that value is really translated in sustainability, which we're very good at.
You know, it seems to me that 10, 15 years ago, now that like Browder's Birds is here and people are raising bison and cattle and you know, other animal meat products on the North Fork, and in this span of time, they have, first they had a mobile butchering facility or processing for the chickens and for the cows. Otherwise, they had to send it to, you know, Amish country to be processed. Seems to me that somebody could be creating or reopening a fish processing facility for, right?
Interpret that again.
Shouldn't somebody be finding a way to open a fish processing facility?
Well, that's actually what we've done.
You have?
Yeah,
So it
in
doesn't have to go elsewhere now?
Well, here's a very good discussion point. Here's what I believe. I don't think that our island supports a massive fish processing facility like you might see in Cape May, New Jersey.
Okay.
And there's a few reasons for this. We've got our highly residential island, okay? There's not a great place to put things, and then you've got logistics about getting everything to it. Here's what I believe. We created a fish hub in Quogue that has a tolerance to handle as much as we can. And I think other communities would be very well serviced by their own fish hubs in relation to size of the landings. So I mentioned earlier that New York State gets 7% of the East Coast landings. New Jersey is in the teens. And that makes their industry that much bigger.
Oh, yeah.
Literally, like you go to Cape May and you've got Bumblebee Cannery there, you've got Lund's Seafood, like big names, and it's really, you're almost awestruck by the size of what they're doing, but they can because of their quota. All right, so New York State, I believe that on this island, having a few fish hubs right out to Montauk that service an immediate place, you might find people specializing and saying, hey, we're the squid people. We're gonna process all the squid and we're gonna adapt to just that. What we're doing with Pascal Seafood is we're taking that product as far as we can and bringing it to the end user as well with this commitment and transparency. So there's a lot of variations of what processing can be, but I don't see, like when people say processing, I think we all imagine the same thing, this big white building, brick and mortar with smokestacks and machinery and forklifts. It can be done differently, and that's kind of what we're up to.
Peter, who do you sell your fish to?
We have a lot of outlets for our fish, and they could go to other wholesalers if they're in need of it, but we prefer to direct it to restaurants. We're very good at specializing that product to their needs, meaning we've got an account right now that's asking that we prepare clam stock and chopped clam for them. Nobody else will do that on a local level. If you have a clam chowder, generally it comes out of a can in the restaurant. Am I wrong? I mean,
we don't do a clam chowder. We do.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, we do a really good seafood chowder, but we actually have whole clams and we make it like totally from scratch.
That's wonderful.
So we
and that's
make
a
it
testament to a wonderful
we make we
establishment.
boil the clams and then we take them out and we chop them all up, the mussels too.
Yeah.
And it takes forever, but it's so good.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you know what, that's what,
It's
when we
like-
plug in,
It takes all day to make that thing.
some kitchens don't have the time or they don't have the facility to
Yeah.
handle that process,
Yeah.
and that's really where we plug in as a commissary kitchen to them almost. And
That's
we're
cool.
able to take a local
Yeah, that would
product
be nice actually to be able to
and
do.
really,
I'm gonna make clam chowder
Yeah.
now.
yeah, you should.
Seafood chowder, it takes a lot of
Make
time.
New-
Yeah.
Make New England clam chowder, no one does it.
Yeah.
Can't get enough of it. Make New England clam chowder.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
one
Please.
usually.
I love New
Mm.
England clam chowder.
So I hope I answered your question, but,
Questions? Yes, way in the back, young lady.
Hello, so Carolyn, and Corianne, where are you, so Carolyn, is your wine available for sale locally? The one you're making, and Corianne, what local outlets would you suggest for the South Fork?
Yeah, unfortunately you can, well, I guess it's also good too, because you have to come to Lovely Kitchen to get it, but there's a liquor license, like, my liquor license only lets me have it's on-premise consumption, so you have to drink it there. Me and Allie tried to figure out a way to maybe sell it on her website, but 60 cases is a lot for me, but like in the grand scheme of things, it's like really not a lot. So we just kept it at the restaurant. So you have to come and get it. The white wine is sold out, but the rosé is still out. Yep.
And actually, Randy deals with the South Fork sales. So
South Fork?
Yeah, South Fork.
Our retail locations, King Cullen, Bridgehampton. We're in restaurants like Town Line Barbecue. We sell food service as well. Schmitz.
Oh, cool.
We're in Schmitz.
IGAs. I think I've seen
IGAs, we're in
Sag
Narragansett
Harbor,
IGA.
yeah.
Yep. We're in Katinas.
Provisions?
We're in about 35 or 40 outlets in the Hamptons.
Wow.
But I always forget. I have to look at my list.
I get them at the Sag Harbor Farmers
may
Market.
I interject?
Yeah.
I realize I
Scavone.
didn't completely answer that question because we were on a roll of where our distribution is, and I didn't get a chance to say something important about our seafood, is that we benefit from working closely with farm stands and other farm-related areas that sell produce, because the problem that I think over the years where seafood has lagged behind agriculture is the logistics of it. So we have some wonderful accounts like the Milk Pail, and Amber
She was our
Waves,
first Hamptons account.
wonderful Amy is there.
They do a good job there.
In
Yeah.
which you can sell your fish?
Yeah, so what we do.
They have a freezer.
Here's how it works. We've got two versions of a grab-and-go type thing that can service a farm stand, which would be fresh salads, which include a local tuna salad, a local calamari salad, and a ceviche that rotates with different types of fish in it. And then we have our frozen seafood program. So like at the Milk Pail, for instance, she does have freezer space to display these things properly. So you can't put that kind of thing everywhere, but you find these great matches where you find synergy between the land and water. And so that's another thing that you just hadn't seen that until we kind of cracked the code on the logistics of making it an item somebody can pick up and take out.
One-stop shopping, which is
Right.
appreciated
Yeah.
here
Yeah, so-
in a certain time of year.
That's another reach to our
Because they sell
retail.
wine at Milk Pail too.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
And donuts. Yes, way in the back, Carol. Carol has a question.
Fishy question. Peter, years ago I was in a restaurant in Montauk, and the menu said fresh day boat fish
Mhm.
from Montauk, and it was tilapia.
Ah,
And I thought, how do you stop someone from doing that, or if they say it's a Montauk pearl oyster and it really isn't? Is
Yeah.
there a mechanism that you?
Well, it's illegal to do that.
Yeah.
It's illegal to put that on your menu if it's
Yeah.
not.
Name names.
Yeah, no.
What restaurant was it?
What do you do?
I think
Yeah.
It's illegal, but is there any way that when you see that, you can?
that, in the past, that could have been more of like a game that was played that we kind of tolerated. These days, it's not as tolerable. I don't know how long ago that was. I really don't know if somebody could, well, that's pretty recent. I
Yeah.
think, at that point, like, what would I do myself? I might, ask whoever's helping people, like, what's up with this? I mean, me personally. But they're really running a high risk of some terrible publicity. I mean, all that would have to happen is that a newspaper picked that up, and the embarrassment and shame in Montauk of all places
What
to
about the,
promote something like that. I mean, that to me is like, I don't know why they go there,
do you remember the sea to table scandal?
Yeah, that was recent. There was a whole thing where they were labeling tuna as Montauk tuna, like in the winter.
And they named the boat. They even named the boat.
They named the boat, and it wasn't accurate information, and they paid dearly for that because of the Associated Press picked it up, and I even got involved in an article where they were asking me my thoughts on what happened. And it's a real disappointment to the industry itself because this transparency issue is a big one, and we need to take it seriously. So one thing about Seed at Table, I guess it was, is they were growing so quick. I was reading a report about them that they were going to grow from 16 million to 30 million in the next 2 years. And I'm thinking, how are you keeping up with sustainable seafood at that growth rate? How are you connecting these dots? To me, it didn't make sense. So I wasn't shocked to find out that they were playing games with what is really integral to that trust factor we have to have with the public.
But it is okay, some chefs, this is a good Tom Shaudell, who, as you know, is funny as heck also. So sometimes chefs do try to come up with names for fish because bluefish might not sell, or porgy. So they try to come up with sexier names for them on the menu. And Tom Shaudell, he had bluefish on the menu, which I don't see ever on a menu anymore. And he changed the name to Cobalt Snapper. It flew out the door. Isn't that a beautiful name for a fish? Cobalt Snapper couldn't, sold out every night. It's bluefish. Okay, one more question. Yes, I see a sleeve. I see a sleeve in the back, and I can't see
I
it.
love fish, but I don't know how to cook it.
Okay.
What advice do you give? How does one go about finding that
I think like some quick out of the gate advice that I would give somebody is that with a fish fillet, I think that gravitating to very high heat and searing that fish to keep the moisture in it, fish will cook quickly. If you're not sure if your fillet has cooked through after you've flipped it, simply take like a kitchen knife and allow the weight of the knife to the point to rest on that fillet and let the weight pass through it. If the knife passes and you hit the pan, it's cooked. If you find resistance, and I'm not talking about pushing it through, but just let the weight of the knife bring it through. If you find resistance, that means it's still a little mid-rare, which isn't the end of the world. People enjoy medium rare fish, but I always gravitate to high heat, take it off the burner, and then add a sauce. You can take that pan out and add some butter, caper, garlic, and pour it over the fish rather than trying to do all that at once. So really the technique of cooking, getting it off the pan, make a sauce or a flavor, apply, or greens is, in my opinion, like the best way to approach it out of the gate.
Broil or in a hot frying pan?
I like a hot frying pan, and I like to take a little butter and olive oil. Okay, so the burn point raises a little bit than if it was just butter, but you're gonna allow that fillet to brown and sear because of the fats in the butter. It really gives a nice flavor and the heat.
Dry the fillet, it'll make it nice and dry.
I do like to dry the fillet after a rinse possibly, but also rub the fillet in olive oil, salt and pepper, just basics. Like every fillet I pick up, I'm doing that at least. And then coating that fillet ahead of time with the olive oil helps too as you're flipping it so it doesn't stick if you don't have enough butter underneath it. Sure.
I think that's it for questions. Oh, wait, one more.
Are
Yes.
these chocolate covered pickles?
We actually did have them, North Fork chocolate up on the North Fork when we were originally in the incubator kitchen. They were, fellow food company in there. And he was like, I would love to, do something with these pickles. I was like, hey, whatever you want to do. So, but the recipe that we have, the pumpernickel rye, is one of my favorites actually. It's brown sugar and molasses brine. So we actually took those and he dehydrated them first, and then he covered them in dark chocolate with a little sea salt on top, and it was surprisingly amazing.
Yeah, there we go. Like a giant raisinette.
Yeah, it was almost like a gourmet chocolate covered raisin. It had like a very similar
It's
flavor.
pretty bold, that's a bold thing to try.
Yeah, it wound up being very labor intensive, so he didn't do that for long because of the dehydrating and all that other stuff. But
Right.
it was there.
That's interesting.
It was
So
fun.
I'm sorry, no
No.
chocolate-covered pickles today, but other delicious treats,
Mm-hmm.
right? Thank you guys so much.
Thank
for
you.
coming.